Good morning. My name is Jane Nakano. I'm Senior Fellow with CSIS Energy National Security Program, and I'd like to welcome everyone this morning to here. And the Energy National Security Program is very pleased to co-host this with the CSIS Freeman Chair in China Studies. And we're thrilled to welcome Xiaojie, who's here to present the World Energy China Outlook 2016, and which is an annual outlook by CSIS, which stands for Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, based in Beijing, and it presents a Chinese perspective on the global energy market trends. I think you do have his bio before you, but quickly. Mr. Xu is the Chief Fellow and the Director of the World Energy of the Institute of the World Economics and Politics at CSIS, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And he concurrently holds several important positions, including Executive Director of the Research and Advisory Center at CSIS, a Senior Advisor to the China Energy Fund Committee, and a standing member of the Petroleum Economics Subcommittee of the China Petroleum Society. He heads up the CSIS innovation program called the World Energy China Outlook since 2013, as well as the Energy Transition Report since 2015. And he has specialized in several things, including nuclear, coal, and renewables since 2009. And I think his presentation today is extremely valuable, not for two reasons. I mean, well, certainly because of the quality of the work that his institute does, but the timing couldn't have been better. Certainly the sort of the certain shift in Chinese economic growth pace is something that many of us are looking at and then and trying to figure out how that may impact the global energy market trends. But then also the Chinese government has recently finalized, adopted, the People's Congress has adopted the new the targets under the 13th five-year plan. So we have so much to understand, trying to look, how the global energy picture may look like, including China, but certainly the role of China and Chinese energy demands on the global trends is something that is significant. So we're very pleased that he's here to share with us his insights. And before we move on, just a quick household announcement. Later today, we will be hosting a VIP event here. Not that Mr. Xu is not a VIP, but so there'll be, when you exit, when we're done with this event, there'll be quite a bit of security personnel and also K9 units probably on this floor, but then also the lobby level as you exit. So please be mindful of the I guess, whatever they need to do to get ready for that VIP event. But so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Xiaojie to the podium. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jim, for your introduction. And also, I would like to ask you to forward my thanks to Sarah, to Guy, to Davis, all your team members for help, for assistance to make my trip happen here. This is really my second time, not the first time. I was here in 2014 to speak about our research. Actually is the first edition of World Energy Outlook at that time. Today, I'm very happy to be here at the same place. And today, I would like to share my views and main findings of our research on the third edition of World Energy China Outlook. Before I'm going through some main findings on an analysis of our research, I would like to make a very brief introduction of this project or research, because to some of you may not very familiar with our research project, simply because by the name, leave this change to some of you, World Energy China Outlook. Is that a World Energy Outlook or China Energy Outlook? I like the name actually, personally. This is a good combination. And also this is very indicating interactive outlook, because the relationship between China and the rest of the world is getting so close. I always speak so, energy issues in China is the world. Vice versa as well. World energy is Chinese issue as well. So close ties, the close links to each other. So when we look at China, we have to look at the world as a big picture, what's happening in the world. Any issues in the world will be a bigger background and consequence on China. And some major issue developments we have witnessed in China were not only limited to China itself, has big consequences on the rest of the world as well. That's why, big why behind our research, we should have such research, interactive research, look at China, focus on China at this moment, but we have some clear views on what's the impact on the rest of the world. That is a big why behind our research I was looking here. And the energy outlook we have done now, including several periods. First of all, including annual energy outlook, including last year and this year, and the medium term energy outlook into the 2020, and the long terms to the 2030. And I will mention some issues will be extended to the 2050 as well. We use our similar methodologies close to some international organizations like IEA, analysis approaches, including current policy scenarios, including policies that we have seen, published, released already. But not only existing policy one, but also including some policy intentions, may not release the informal or the form document yet, but still have some intentions that will present bigger implications on the energy development in the coming years on short term. So we said things, policy issue will be included into current policy scenario as well. So our current policy scenario, including current IEA's current policy scenario and a new policy scenario, is combined with the two done by the IEA. And also we have our own scenarios, that is eco-energy strategic scenarios. That is our creations. I will explain a little bit later on. And also we have a database, our independent developed database to support our research. And this database indicated two energy systems according to the two scenarios. And of course, we will focus on energy policy research. So policy research is crucial to our energy outlook. Now we'll talk about a little bit about what the current policy scenarios. In the past 3 years, there's many energy policies has released in the 2013 and 14. About 50 relevant energy policy has released in the 2013 and 14, including strategic planning, planning for actions, some policy for the renewables and fossil fuels, including some very important one I just indicated here, like the energy strategic implementations. That is the comprehensive energy strategies has released and still is working to be in the process of implementation, and also including some plan for action against the emissions from the coal-fired generation. This is a very crucial issue for energy in China, emission standards for the thermal power. Through them, I just mentioned as a few examples of that. Last year, 2015, we also have witnessed over 40 relevant policies released. Some of them will be implemented in this year and will have a greater impact on the development in the coming years, including the one you may be familiar with, the capacity buildings. Some capacity too big, we need to reduce some overcapacity building. And of course, just as Jen mentioned, the 13 5-year plan has finalized officially, and starting from this year, the 5-year plan should be implemented. With these energy policies, we all have to look at the energy situations here we have seen today. What's the energy situations, and what's the policy goals to dealing with? Very simply, energy system here in China is quite clear. I just have a very small but important number to check with. First of all, energy system here in China very much dominated by the fossil fuel. 88% currently. Coal in the primary energy mix continue dominate at the 65%. Coal generation, 70%. Fossil fuel in the final use, this is an important issue I will touch on later on, is still dominated by the fossil fuel as well. Therefore, the energy system here today here in China is quite clear. The issue is quite clear. First of all, energy mix very much carbonized. That is number one issue we have to dealing with, especially given the environmental pollution issues. And also imbalanced. Energy supply and demand very imbalanced. We have rely on foreign import, especially for oil and gas. The foreign dependence continually increase to some levels. This is security issues, energy security issues, and also existing energy patterns is an issue as well. The existing energy process and the patterns cannot be sustainable and challenged seriously. Energy transition is crucial, is a must, we believe, but still have some uncertainties ahead of us. And policies I just mentioned in the previous two slides is quite clear. To dealing with the energy issue I just mentioned, first of all, we have to dealing with coal and other fossil fuels, how to reduce the fossil fuel in energy mix. Coal is an important one. We have to reduce the coal in proportions from the 65% from last year or today almost, down to the 62% in the 2020, and possibly could be reduced down to some level below the 50% or maybe 43% around in the 2030. Fossil fuel demand should be increased from the 12% today to the 15% in the 2020, and to the further on to the 20 or maybe higher in the 2030s. Carbon intensity reduction should be increased. Coal-fired efficiency should be increased, and the passenger car fuel efficiency should be increased as well. Green building, especially for the new one, should be increased to the 50% in the year 2020, and it should be included further on to the 2030, but there's no number yet for that, but we have a clear target for the 2020. Public transport system needed to be built, especially in the major cities. And the national carbon trading system, this is an issue has made very clear by the Sino-US agreement against the climate change is quite clear. China should be built public carbon trading systems next year. That all the things has set clearly by the current policies. So my question is that all these goals are achievable. How to reach them and going forward? Are there any potential, any big room to be increased further on, to increase energy efficiency, for instance? And any gaps will be there between the existing policies and its potentials. And is all the policies is sufficient enough to satisfy what we call the Chinese dreams? The first dream should be a kind of aware-of society should be built in the 2020, and the second dream should be to be one of developing country in the 2050. I believe the energy issue should be an important part of the Chinese dreams. So in the 2020, what the energy issues and the environment issue look like? That is the issue for us, especially for all us stakeholders. So now we believe current energy policy is very well generated. I believe has very well developed to dealing with the issues we have are facing. But also we believe there are some potentials. We need to create some new scenarios with our new visions and some recommendations, especially talking about Chinese dreams in the 2020 and the 2050. That is my creations I just mentioned. First of all, I believe in the future, if we talk about the new pattern of development, the energy system to be built, we have to include the following points into our considerations. Number one is human-based or human-centered. That were crucial issues, I believe, based on our independent research. Instead of the GDP indexed or GDP-centered. And the second thing is the 4E. You may familiar 3 E's, economic, energy, environment. But I believe the fourth E is ecosystems, which will be much more important, I believe should be listed on the top of on the 3 E's. The 4 E's will be interlinked with the ecosystem on the top. And the 3 points, the environment protections should be very well balanced with the energy security concerns. The both should be balanced well. And the 4 things I just mentioned in the 2020, we should be less polluted. The air should be very sure as a major things, a part of the major transition to the low carbon economies, while clean energy system needed to be built in the 2030 and beyond. Energy source is no longer a commodity, I believe, but also is a type of services to our societies, to our new type of new lifestyles and new development patterns. This is our new visions, new concept on the energy source. It's no longer could be dominated by the certain sectors. It should be a public service. The public policy should be there as well. And also last things, so all the new strategy should be featured by a set of consumptions and indicators. So in the following, we employed 2 sets of assumptions together with 2 scenarios, current policy scenarios and eco-energy strategy scenarios. We have 2 sets of assumptions with 2. Well, I just list a few of them, not in 4, including populations, GDP growth, secondary industry outputs in the whole economic systems, and efficiencies, of course. It's very much important. So talking about the economic growth, for instance, under the current policy, scenario, I believe in the next 5 years, economic growth will be maintained somewhere between 6.5 and 7%. That is possibly, as announced officially by the government. And I believe 6.5 is crucial and important for the economy to be doubled again by the 2020, to some certain level to be reached, and where our society will be there. I believe so. The 6.5 is important, is necessary in the minimum, I believe, under the current policy scenarios before it's coming down a little bit. But under our recommended scenarios, I believe after the 2020, the economic growth could be a little slower than the one set by the current policy scenarios. So simply because some thinking behind the economic growth is the relation between the size and the speed. China GDP is getting larger and larger, 1 trillion. They cannot move fast as it did before. It has before. They have to little bit slow down. That will be a good to take care of the whole the things as so big size of the economy, and also should be take good care of the economic qualities, not quantities. So the little bit slowdown will be a good sign to take care of the energy structure reforms and quality enhancement. That is two set of thinking behind the economic growth, I believe, and our consumptions for. And in the following, we have 8 trends findings actually from our research as a core of our findings. Number 1 is the energy demand. That is number 1 thing. So what the energy demand will look like within our outlook period of times. First of all, very clearly under current policy scenarios, we believe energy demand will continue to increase, but not at fast as we have seen before. Little bit slow down at a low pace, but will continue to increase. But one thing is sure, there is no peak or peak plateau could be seen within our outlook period of time under the current policy scenarios. It will continue to increase, but a little bit slow down. That is the issue we have seen. But in terms of our recommended scenarios, we believe energy demand could be slowed down, could be peak at the year around 2020 and almost maintain is the current level until the 2030s. So there is a big gap between the two. The future development could be somewhere between the green lines and the blue lines. Simply because why? Simply because many things I would like to say, but 2 things. Someone asked me what's the 2 most important things to reduce the energy consumptions in the years to come. Number 1 thing I would like to mention is economic slowdown. Economic slowdown, especially under our recommended scenarios, will be reduced the energy consumptions. That will be most important things that make a great sense in the year before the 2020 and even 2025. But after that, energy efficiency will play a big role to reduce the energy consumptions, because giving the economic reforms, giving to the energy management system as a big business to be promoted, because many things, to increase the energy saving will be a big things in the future. So this is, I listed the 2 of the things to contribute a great deal to reduction of energy consumptions in the years to come. The second findings I would like to mention is electric power generations or electrifications in the end use. First of all, I would like to mention the power generation, electricity generations in the last year and this year almost is living in the same place. To some extent, power generations a little bit oversupplied. That is the issue we have witnessed. I believe in this year and probably next year will be the same. So the electricity generation will be keep the same, and before it's coming up slightly because we have get the economic reform ready, get the industrial restructure ready, and keep a big momentum to push the industrialization and urbanizations. That will be increase big requirements for the electricity generations. So will be increased. Under the current scenario will be increased, and our recommended scenario leave the slowdown. So still is the gap is there. The reason almost the same as we have explained for the energy demand. So electricity generation is one case, one important part of the energy demand going forward. That is the one thing I would like to explain to all of you. But another thing I would like to convey here is electrifications. Even we against the slowdown of the electricity generations in the years to come, but still we can increase electrifications in end use. That is highly possible for us by reducing coal use in end use, to reduce the oil and some other fossil fuels in the end use, to increase the electrifications in end use, especially for the building, for residential use, and the industries. For industries, for instance, in the future, according to the Chinese version of the Industry 4.0, like that, we call industrialization in the year 2025, something like that. We will push forward automation and digitalization. We have to use internet plus some type of industries. So I believe for the industrial sector, the electrification will be increased together with automation and digitalizations. And the green building, again, will be there. So this, a new type of energy will be used for the green buildings in the years to come. So it is possible for the two curves will be coexist. One is higher electrifications in end, the use will be increased, continue to increase against the low level of the power generations. The three items I would like to mention is coal consumptions. Again, this coal is so crucial, important for China. China is a big coal producers and consumers, but not biggest coal resources. In resources, China is far behind of the US. So coal is, in some way, I believe, is overused. But again, I would like to mention coal contribute a great deal to the economic growth in the past 30 years. It's a big contributor to the economic growth. But again, the side effect is so seriously. We have to dealing with dirty coal. Coal today is dirty. That is true, simply because the pattern, the usage, the process is still conventional, traditional. So it's quite hard for us to dealing with the dirty coal. So what's the solution for us? Number one thing is we have to reduce the coal in total. And also we have to reduce the coal proportions in primary energy mix. Actually, coal now is almost reached the peak. Last year we have witnessed zero growth. And this year could be slowed down. simply because oversupplied and some over capacity as well as part of the policy targeted. We need to reduce the overcapacity. Some small size of the coal plants, some unperforming project need closed up. Some like the burning should be removed, especially in the east part of the country. So the coal should be one solution is quite clear. Reduction should be reduced in total and in proportions. So for our scenarios under the current scenario could be increased a little bit, but almost keep the same. The peak could be in the 2025 under the current scenarios, but in our recommended scenarios, it should almost peak, a little bit flat, and until the 2020 before it's coming down. That is the issue for coal. That is one solution, general solutions for coal. And most importantly, we have to reduce the coal in the final use from almost 29% today to almost zero in the year 2030. That is the things we have, is target for us. We have to work very hard to reduce the coal use in end sectors. But another thing I would like to mention is coal. We have to increase the coal use for power generations a little bit in proportion. Today, coal used for the power generation is 40%. I'm talking about the coal equivalent, not talk about the coal itself. So 40% of the coal used for power generation. That level, we believe, still is low. We should be increased this percentage to somewhere like 50 or even 60% in the year 2030s, simply because we have very advanced power generation technology packages, especially given to ultra supercritical power generations that can use the coal efficiently and reduce the emissions from the coal use. That is a fundamental way. I want to mention the energy efficiency for the coal sectors later on. We have big progress has made through ultra supercritical generations, especially secondary heating technology employed, and some CFB circulated fluidized bed boilers, could be used. That is the things. The three types of the things is Chinese solutions, I believe, to dealing with the coal. And fourth things is oil and gas. First of all, natural gas as a relatively cleaner source. We believe consumption is there. We need to increase domestic supply, and we need to import additional source from abroad, both in form of the pipeline natural gas and LNG as well. For LNG, I believe the requirements will be there or should be increased from abroad within our outlook period of time. And pipeline natural gas could be increased to the year around 2025 and leveled off a little bit according to the major project that we have planned. Anyway, the natural gas demand is there. And supply should be increased. Most importantly, we have to emphasize our exploration and development at the home. And I believe unconventional natural gas will be a big contributor behind of the domestic growth. But not very much I don't believe the shale gas will be a big contributor as one of the conventional source. Instead, tight gas will be a big contributor in the years to come in China. Today, last year, actually, we haven't satisfied our goal set for the shale gas at the 6.5 BCM. because of many things, lower pricing and high cost, some other things there. It's not easy for China to develop the shale gas quickly, but I still believe shale gas will be a main source of the three, shale gas, CBM, and tight gas. The three combined will be a big contributor to the future energy supplies in China. Oil demand, I believe, still will be there, especially given to the big requirements from the transport sectors. I believe demand will be there, especially for the diesel. Consumption will be increased. So gasoline will be there, will be increased, but the diesel may present a little bit different story. The diesel will be increased and peak at the year around 2017 or 80s, possibly, and come down. That is a different issue between the gasoline and the diesel. Gasoline will be continued to increase. That is the ratios between the two I have to mention in the left and slide here. But another thing I would like to mention regarding the oil consumption is substitutions. Oil product demand is there, but also we have to closely look at some new source of energy will replace the oil as a fuel, especially in energy sector. I forgot to mention at the beginning when we talk about the current policy issues in the last year. There is a strong policy message has released from the policy makers dealing with electricity vehicles. The clear message is there. The strong measures will be taking place. I believe in the future, electricity vehicles, together with other type of new energy source vehicles, like the LNG vehicles, biofuel vehicles, together, I believe the new energy vehicle will play a very important role to replace a big amount of the oil as a fuel in the future. That is the things we have to look at. First thing, the structure change for the oil products like diesel and gasoline. Second thing, the oil demand, some demand will be replaced by the new source of the energy. That is the things is very serious when we're looking in the future of the oil demand into the future. That is things we have look at the oil. So the foreign dependence could be increased further on to 65%. That is possible in the next 5 or 10 years, but not much, simply because we have to consider seriously about the new energy vehicles. We roughly calculated in the 2020 about 40 million tons of the oil as a fuel will be replaced. And 8 million ton, we call million ton, 8 million ton will be replaced in the 20-30 years, 30s. That is the issue we have take a note regarding the oil. So the oil sector is quite tough for the sectors, for the sector people. They have to dealing with 3 lows. Number 1 is low demand growth. Number 2 is low price. Therefore, they have to generate low cost strategies. Number 4 things, third thing is low emission. So they have to dealing with 3 lows. Low growth, low demand growth, low price, and low emissions. That is a new reality facing the oil sectors. They have to think about how to transmit themselves to be survive. Number 5 things is non-fossil fuel. Non-fossil fuel is the main source of the power generations, I believe, and we continue to increase, I just mentioned at the beginning. In the primary energy non-fossil fuel should be increased from 12% currently to 20% in the year 2030, possibly higher under all recommended scenarios, could be higher. So I have no big concerns about the non-fossil fuel to be reached the goal, this level, 20%, hopefully really higher. And in the future, the non-fossil fuel will be a very important clean power source for the energy generations in the years to come. Many items, under these topics, wind, solar, biofuel. But something I would like to mention is nuclear. I would like to mention. Nuclear is indispensable in China, given the very developed nuclear sectors in China built in the last 60 years, and the nuclear power sectors built in the past 30 years. So we have a big industrial base. So we have huge resources. Nuclear now is just started. Now we have almost 30 gigawatt capacity is already mainly located in the east coastline of China. And we have full momentum to increase. I believe the industry is getting ready to increase, to double its capacity from current level, 30 gigawatts, to maybe over 100 gigawatts, even higher, even 130 gigawatts. They are possible. There's no issues, big issues in terms of technology, capacities, resources in China. And therefore, nuclear will, in primary energy consumption mix, could be increased from the 2% currently to the 60% in the 2030, or 40%. 40% and 60% are highly possible. That is one thing we can imagine, if we talk about nuclear sectors alone. So in the year after 2020, China could be overtake US and France to be the largest nuclear power country. That is highly possible. But the issue for us is not the issue of nuclear itself. There's no question about the resources, capacities is there. The issue is two following. So one thing is nuclear is clean source. There's no question, but nuclear cannot plan by itself. They cannot proceed it alone because competitions. As the same clean source, there is a close ties with other types of non-fossil fuels. We have to take good care of synergic development. Synergic development should be very well managed, between the nuclear and the other type of the non-fossil fuel clean energy source. Short term, something happened to nuclear, natural gas will come immediately available to replace. And in the long run, I believe non-hydro renewable wind and solar is in particularly a must. So we have to deal with the relations between nuclear and other type of renewables. So renewable is highly possible. We can reach the high level, high case at 60% in primary energy possible. That is the case. It's very feasible, I believe. And therefore will be reduce some pressures on other type of new energy source like the gas, wind, and solar. But I also will have to think about the technology advances in the wind, solar, and even gas as well is developed fast. Cost is reduced sharply. So there is nuclear will be facing some serious competitions with the wind and the solar. Of course, nuclear, if given the big size of the project, they have some rooms to reduce their cost when it's alarmed, so to regenerate is a process. But still, they were facing some big challenges from wind and solar. So we have to deal with the nuclear. What the size and the speed will be for the nuclear? That is a serious questions. The industrial questions, for the sector and for central policy planner as well. I'm not talking about too much about nuclear safety, social acceptance. That is the issues, of course, especially given the project to be built in not only additionally in the coastline, but in the inland, in central China, in some ecological friendly issues. That is the issue of social acceptance. But I think we can dealing with the issues, in China. It's not big deal. Another thing we have to dealing with, something we need to take good care is nuclear and its relation with other type of the non-fossil fuels. That is the issue. I will skip this one. That is about nuclear reactor types and projects. We have getting the fully ready, get this type of nuclear project to be built in the next 5 years. Not only use AP 1000 we introduced from Americas, we have our own technology package as well. We call HPR, Hualong, that means China. The Hua pressurized reactor 1000. We have our own technologies. Number 7 items I would like to mention, energy efficiencies. That is so crucial issues. Even we talk about energy consumption at the beginning. Why energy consumption or energy electricity generation could be reduced? Why the bigger is there? Simply because energy efficiency. Now, the OECD energy efficiency in the OECD quite, is quite high. The energy cost per the unit, the GDP is quite low. Quite far low below the world average. And the non-OECD is higher than world average in terms of energy cost per unit of GDP. And very remarkably case is China. Energy efficiency is reduced. The energy cost is reduced, energy efficiency increased sharply in China. That is macro things we have witnessed in the past years, and will be continue its chance in the future. And I believe energy efficiency is not a matter of policies. It cannot be planned by the policy planners or policy makers. Energy efficiency is a matter of the industry, is a matter of project, is a matter of technology innovations. It should be possible on the ground. So energy efficiency potential are evident if you look at the industry. There is some, at least some sectors, energy efficiency for some certain sectors, for instance, coal, again, so important to China. Coal used for power, for instance, the coal cost per kilowatt hours. Today, almost the level is 320, maybe lower. Last year could be like the 220 or a little bit lower. That is the average level we have for the coal cost per kilowatt hour for the coal-fired generations. That is the average level. But we have seen some best practice done by large size or supercritical power plants. They already reduced the coal cost down to the 276. That almost advanced level throughout the country. Maybe is very compatible in the world as well. Now, even though some advanced projects are now under planning, because they can reduce the coal cost further reduced down to 251. that almost is the highest level of the energy efficiency in the world, and this is possible. That level now has tested by the major project by the Shanghai Waigaoqiao number 3 power plant already. This project possibly will be built in end of this year, not in coastline, but in Anhui province. And the project will be finalized in the year 2018. By that time, 250 grams per kilowatt hour will be possible. That will be almost advanced energy efficiency for the coal power sectors. That is the progress we have made. Some other similar progress is made for other type of energy sectors: steel, cement, flat glasses, refining, ethylene, synthetic ammonia. So compared with the best practice, we believe there is a big potential. For coal, I believe there is 16 potential. For refining, there are almost 30% potential. For the synthetic ammonia, almost over 50% potential is there compared with the best practice. So the energy efficiency potential is there. So if the policy could be make a very clear, send a very clear message to the sectors, energy efficiency is there. The energy consumption will be reduced for sure. The last things I would like to touch on the carbon emissions. That's almost the outcome of all things that we discussed. First of all, energy consumption. If energy consumption, especially fossil fuel, energy consumption could be reduced at a low level under the current policy, especially could be peak in the year 2020 and coming down in the thereafter, there will be a big contributor to reduce the carbon emissions, especially coal. Coal now is the peak. That is good signs, very good signs. We have to keep and going such momentums. If we can make the coal cleaner, today's coal is quite dirty, but for the industry, we're fully confident that coal can be clean. Coal can be one type of the clean energy source. Even by nature, coal is very mixed by many elements, but that is nature. If we will use the coal wisely, especially use most advanced technology process, we can increase the coal power generations, coal efficiency, and reduce the emission from the coal, get everything under the control. Especially CCS could be possible, could be deployed for the coal project once the coal efficiency increased to a certain level. I will mention, I forgot to mention these points. I mentioned, the two, when I talk about the coal efficiency, if the coal cost per kilowatt hour could be reduced to 250, that will make the CCS or CCUS possible, highly possible for some major projects. Today, we cannot possible, but because of high cost. If we put the CCUS on the existing power plant, we will immediately increase the coal cost. That is make things very impossible economically. So there is a close relation between the efficiencies and the CCS deployment. So the carbon emission will look like this accordingly. If we make the energy transition happening, as just I described in the previous slides, the carbon emission will look like this. Under the current policy scenario, will be continually to increase, but will be peak. Some peak level will be seen during our outlook period of time at the 2025, for instance. So ideally, could be peak in the 20 years before you're coming down. That is the issue we have seen for the carbon emissions. And also we have many measures could be taken place to make the carbon emission reduction possible. I just list 10 or many of them as an example. For instance, number one thing we have to emphasize renewable. We have to increase the renewable. Renewable will be a big contributor to reduce the carbon emissions. That immediately impact on the reduction of the carbon emission. That is the one thing, especially after the year 2020, the big contributor of that. Nuclear, as an important part of the non-fossil fuel, will contribute a great deal as well. So we cannot go without nuclear in China. China nuclear still is there if it's competitive to the other type of the energy. Nuclear should be there. And energy saving, that is another side of the energy efficiency. If we have to increase the energy efficiency, especially in the year 2025 or 2030s. And the CCUS will be possible once energy efficiency increases to a certain level. And the clean fuel will be there. As we just discussed for the electricity vehicles, new types of energy vehicles will play a big important role to replace the oil as a fuel. So this is another measures to reduce the CO2 emission in the years to come. So I will summarize some 3 points based on discussed all things above mentioned. Number one summary message is what does China energy look like in the year 2020 and beyond? Under our recommended scenarios, the best things we would like to see is 3 types of the peaks. Energy demand, hopefully, possibly, to be peak at the year 2020 at the 4.6 billion tons coal equivalent. Coal consumption could be peak at the same year as well, at the same level I just indicated here. Carbon emission should be peak accordingly, because major carbon emissions come from fossil fuel. If we can't get the fossil fuel under the control peaked at the same year, carbon emission will be followed. That is the 3 types of peaks. Hopefully could be seen under our recommended scenarios. In this sense, we believe the current energy policy scenario, there is a big potential there. There are some goals, some loans need to be tapped. Another type of the 350%, that is a non-fossil fuel installed capacity. Currently, we have reached 35%. We believe we can increase the non-fossil fuel installed capacity increased to the 54%. That is over 50% in the year 2030, almost reached 50% in the 2030. And non-fossil fuel generation could be reached 50% as well, almost there, 49%. Electrification in the final use will be over 50% as well in the 2030. I believe possibly they could be realized in the year after the 2020s or even 2030s, simply because some energy consumptions, especially oil, can be reduced in the year 2030. And the coal, of course, will be reduced below the 2%. That is another 3 types of 50% I would like to mention. That is some very bright future, immediate future, we will happy to see. That is one message. Second message is China. What does China look like? For my point of view, based on our research, China just look like I just described. 2030 will look like have the 3 types of the peaks. three type of the 50% in the 2030 and the 50s. But for other organizations like IEA may make different projections. So the IEA and my organization, Institute of World Economic and Politics, which is my project based, they have different conclusions. From my perspective, I believe in the year 2020, coal could be much reduced to a certain level, like the 38 million tons or equivalent, much lower than level forecasted by the IEA. And the gas could be higher than IEA, and the CO2 emission will be lower, much lower than the level produced by the IEA. So there is a different China we will have seen by the different research projects. IEA has their Chinese story, we have our own Chinese stories. And also, world energy may look different because of China. Because of China. If we talk about the world energy demand, taking into China, especially our calculation into account, the world energy demand could be less, could be much less in the year 2030. And especially coal. That is very understandable because half of the energy consumption is in China. Oil, little smaller. Gas will be increased. Nuclear will be increased. Generation, especially a new type of energy generation, will be increased to almost 200 million tons for the nuclear, and also for wind and solar as well. That is a different type of the world energy pictures look like because of different calculations on China, simply because Chinese position. I believe energy demand, we talk about energy demand, China still maintain its 20%, little bit over today and little bit smaller tomorrow. Coal will be reduced, of course. Today, almost 50%. And tomorrow, like the 2030, coal consumption will, proportion of China in the world will reduce to the 40%. Oil almost the same, I believe. Gas will be increased from the 9% to the 12%. Nuclear, of course, will be increased remarkably. Hydro, bio, and also other type of renewables will be increased as well, as there was bigger implications will be there. So our conclusion, number one, is current policy scenario we have seen in the past 3 years are correctly generated and well-positioned, I believe, to reach their goals, to dealing with the realities I just mentioned at the beginning. However, demand growth pattern may persist. And the energy transition will be there, but at a lower pace, based on our independent research. By contrast, all goals can be satisfied and overtaken under our recommended scenarios. Our expected transition will come together with lower GDP growth, industrial reform and restructuring, higher efficiency, of course, and all of them will be resulting with low carbon emissions as a result. More importantly, trajectory under our recommended scenario, I always repeatedly emphasized such a scenario, indicated a great sense of new type of environment quotidian curves, patterns, compared with we have seen in developing countries. That is, following this, some separate research we have concluded, talking about environment quotidian curves, which is indicated the relations between the CO2 emissions and the economic growth, the relation between the two. We have seen developing country has make its journey from the beginning to its peak plateau and come down. almost make a very beautiful classical the curves from the beginning, top and down. In developing countries like India and China is just increased at the beginning. But China, different from India, is almost reach some critical level, critical point. At the current policy scenario may increase continuously, slightly, but at our recommended scenario could be a critical point, coming at the crossroads where we should go, we should decide it. This picture is in total quantities we calculated. If we talk about the per capita, that the curve seems more beautiful, more classical. For the developing country, they have to make the whole course of the coordinates curves already. China and India still coming up, but haven't found the way where is positioned. In the coming years. China now is really at the crossroads. So if China make its energy transition moving forward, just following the steps I just described, China could be to pave its own way. Its new type of the coordinates curves will become, not following exactly the course of developing country have witnessed. That is something I use the number indicated here. China, under our recommended scenarios, coordinates curves could be picked in the year 2019 or roughly 2020 at the CO2 emission, like some level below the 7 tons per capita, at the economic growth per capita at the 5,000 per capita US dollar, much lower level than the developing countries. And the CO2 emission peak plateau is lower than we have seen in developing countries. In US, for instance, the CO2 per capita peaked at the 24 point, Japan 11%, 11 terms, and some European country at the 10 terms. But the peak plateau duration could be, for China, could be some little bit longer than US, similar like Japan, and longer than European countries. That is something we have seen little bit different type of coordinates curves could become, simply because China, if it can make its energy transition as we have described. So almost last conclusion. My recommended scenario is a visionary approach, and I believe it's feasible if policy options like lower GDP growth, lower cost, low coal cost, and oil cost in proportion proceeded in coherent manners, while growth, the growth could in the non-fossil fuel facilitated. In parallel, synergetic development is crucial. It's very important issues I have to mention, and to our expected future, dealing with very well with multiple energy sources, especially dealing with coal in China, and also gas as well, nuclear specifically, and also higher efficiency, smart systems, energy reform, and have to be interlinked and prioritized as well. So last point I just mentioned, all the things are coming from our independent research and the other outlook research with intent to build up our energy future, aiming at a low carbonized, greener, smarter, sustainable energy development in China. There are different prospects between different organizations, IEA and ours. But I believe interactive outlook is necessary, is important for the dialogue and cooperation, and even for the energy governance. I'm very happy to share my views with all of you. And I would like to stop here for the question.
Thank you very much, Xiaojie. So let me, that was a sort of tour de force. I mean, you certainly covered quite a bit, quite a ground. And we do have about 15 minutes left, and I'm sure many of you have some really important questions to ask, but I may, if I may, I'd like to start with some of the questions while you might want to finalize what's on your mind in the audience. I guess sort of going back to the assumptions, one of the major non-energy specific highlights out of the recent Chinese policy discussions was to abandon the one-child policy. And how does that impact your, I guess, population growth assumption? I mean, in other words, I mean, so compared to what the modeling you did last year, did it have a major impact? I mean, looking at the figures, I didn't really see a dip or really jump, so that's sort of a starter question for me, if I.
Yes, that is about population. If one family could have two, the population will be increased. But some conclusions that there's no big impact on the population increase and the big requirements from the increase of all the populations. But important things we have to look at the next generation is their attitude. What's the next generation or their attitude to the energy? To the energies, That is the issue we have to seriously look at. We have to get ready, make the energy transformed to be a cleaner, sustainable, resilient for the next generation. And they have made their own views on the energy solutions. We may not imagine, but we have to think about, to make the energy system much more flexible, much more internet-based, to generate the more resilient systems for next generation.
Thank you. And another sort of a big picture question is the low oil or low, I guess, energy price environment that we've been in since summer of 2014 about. And I know that China has recently had several major gas field discoveries. And maybe the oil side could be, maybe I've just missed the oil side, but at least for those assets, do you see the pace of upstream developments slowing down? Or, I mean, and how do you think that may affect the...
Actually, oil production is slowed down already, especially for some ailing oil field, including largest one we call Daqing oil field. They have reduced their production as planned. They have to reduce. That is the issue. So for short term, I believe, especially this year, I believe oil import will increase. Okay. Simply because the pricing, low price. There's no sense to increase the domestic production, increase the domestic supply at the high cost. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'd like to open the floor to questions. When you do have a question, please raise your hand and wait for a microphone. And just please identify yourself, your name, and also your affiliation. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Xu, for coming here. So my name is Ivy, and I'm a recent college grad from University of Southern California. So in your presentation, you're mentioning that each year China is releasing a lot of policies to increase its energy efficiency. So can you talk a little bit more about what are the challenges or what will be the main challenges, not on the, like when implementing these policies, not on the central government level, but on the public level? And in your presentation,
but on policy level?
Public
level, okay.
Yes, and in your presentation, you were, several times you were mentioning about incentives. So what are the incentives are we looking at right here? So yeah, that's my question. Thanks.
Yeah, that is the issue. You mentioned very critical point, very crucial issue. You mentioned the some incentives from the public side. Now everything is made by the central government, made by the industry. Pay less attention to the reactions and response from the public. That is the issue. Public would like to have a better service. Efficiency sometimes, of course, that is the issue of the industry you should provide to us, right? As a customer, as a society, we need a better service. No matter what type of energy, oil, gas, I need a clean energy anyway. No matter what the source for the power. You can produce from the wind, from the solar. Anyway, we would like to clean energy. That is the public attitude to the things. I believe we have to factor the policy expectations into our policy makings. When we're dealing with the issues, we have to take a good care of what type of energy service we should to provide to the public. That is the number one thing. The efficiency is a matter of the industry. You should provide to them, simply because based on technology innovation. It's a requirement from the public, but it should be done by the industry, by the professional people. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you.
Next question. Yes.
Hi, Bob Eichord from the Atlantic Council. Thank you very much for your presentation. I hope you're right in terms of the transition. As you obviously talked about the issues of energy intensity and how that's going to change. What are some of your thoughts about the assumptions about the fundamental restructuring of the Chinese economy away from such heavy energy-intensive industries? You talk about the individual industries and their potential, but how about the overall structural change? And then, to me, the other aspect that's really important as you look at changing this mix is how is the electricity sector reform going to incentivize this mix? Because we hear about the problems of integrating renewables into the grid and things like that. So how do you see this developing, and how important is this electricity reform in the process?
The electricity, I believe, is a central part of the energy system. As always, now actually electricity reform is launched already, but facing some very tough issues, moving extremely slow. We have learned some lessons from other countries. The electricity sector reform always moving slow. In China, we have a master plan made very clear to push forward the electricity reform already. We also last year come up with a dozen of supporting policies to push forward the drives, the electricity reform drives. But still, we're facing lots of the issues relating to the power generators, to the distributors, transmission sectors, distribution sectors, and the users. And also, there's something to do with the pricing issues, how to dealing with the price for the industrial users and the residential users. That's quite tough. That is the things we're raising very comprehensive issues. They may not a single sector issue. If we push anything like the distribution sector push forward, the whole things will be disturbed. That is a tough thing for the electricity reform in the coming years. But I believe the momentum is there. The reform will be pushed forward, especially the tough thing is for transmission and distribution sector. this is an important part of to the entire energy, the power systems. So far, this sector is very much dominated by the state grid corporations. They have to get to the ready. First of all, that may maintain its a state-owned position, but at the same time, they have to be regulated to make it have the open access, let the other source of the energy, like the wind and the solar, can have a good access into their systems. That is a tough thing. Next things need to be facilitated. Macro things, I'm not a macroeconomics, that is the tough things. Anyway, we have to transform the energy development patterns, from the heavy industry dominated one to the service dominated one. But it is not easy. Now, someone say it's now China coming into technology-based innovation driving stages. I don't think it is come, but it's quite take a long time, quite a long time.
Quickly on the power sector reform, I think, as you mentioned, the future of the state-owned enterprises. I mean, their role it seems to be like sort of an overarching issue that I think policymakers have to address, not just in the power sector, for better or worse, but in each of the sector, beyond energy, if you will. But those are great questions. Thank you, Bob.
Yes, my name is Kikuchi, and I'm with Washington Research and Analysis. Thank you very much. This is a very comprehensive review or projections of what happens to China. As you know, in Japan, in 2010, there was a very robust program of increasing nuclear power stations. They had 54 reactors working. Today, there are 3, and any possibility of building a new one is almost 0. And this is because, aside from the true cost of power of what to do with spent fuel, etc., it is the public perception against nuclear power, not always rational, but still it's there. Have you adjusted your nuclear power program based on what you see is happening in Japan? That is my question.
Nuclear, what's the key issue?
Oh, how the public reactions to Fukushima, on your...
Many different. I believe the nuclear issues quite different. The country from to country. Germany can take zero nuclear. That is possible given that country's situation. Japan previously quite a high nuclear position. After the nuclear disaster, immediately back to the zero nuclear. But in reality, it is not possible. I believe they have to come back to some level of the nuclear usages in Japan, simply because zero emission in Japan totally impossible from professional point of view. If you reduce the nuclear to zero, you have to find the other source immediately available to replace the nuclear gaps. Yes, you have to use natural gas, but still it's quite tough for Japan to make its balance in the energy mix. But it's quite tough and almost fail. That's why they have to come back to increase, to reduce, to increase the nuclear to certain level. That is a wise attitude, I believe. But in China, again, as I mentioned, we have a different situation, different background, different culture. Nuclear actually is not a matter of the industry. I believe Japan has advanced technology, and professional people. China has the same. But culture is the big issue, social issues is behind. If we create a good nuclear safety culture, nuclear social response to the nuclear, that will be raise a very solid social foundation for the industry to development. So far, we're working very hard on the nuclear education and social communication with different communities. Even we started launching such a dialogue and education with school from the, with young, very young generations. In Chinese, the nuclear 和 means working together, some things, 和 nuclear means together with everybody. Actually, nuclear with everybody, or nuclear always exist with human beings. We have to talk about this point friendly, peacefully to every stakeholders. Let them well understand what the nuclear means. Today, nuclear very well managed. Any disaster, possible disaster, are under very serious control. As I witnessed, I make many site visits to many power plant, nuclear power plant coastline in China. Japan's disaster is a very specific case. It's not a natural disaster. I believe that is a very highly human relevant disaster. It can be controlled.
Other questions? Yeah. Actually, let me take, so each person probably got like a minute to ask. So let me take 3 questions and then just bundle them up and then have Xiaojie respond. So 3, so that lady over there, and then I haven't taken anyone from this side. Am I missing anyone this side of the room? No, okay.
No.
Then that gentleman over there near you, Andrew, and then there. So so the lady 1, 2, and 3. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Yi Jiachen from Finance Center at World Resources Institute. And thank you very much for your presentation about China's outlook in energy. And I have 2 questions. The first one is, you mentioned that coal is a core problem in China currently. And you said oversupply of coal in China has caused a lot of problem. And one of the solutions I know is that state-owned enterprises like Shenhua will go out and make a lot of overseas investments in such as Southeast Asia and other things too, both in coal mining and coal plants. But China has also promised that to reduce the carbon emission in certain level by 2020. So if you reduce the carbon emission in China, what's your responsibility for other countries like Southeast Asia? Because you just distribute your overcapacity to other countries and increase their carbon emission. And the second question is about energy finance, because money is a major drive behind the phenomenon, and most financing type in China is from state-owned enterprises or public markets. So what about the private financing in China, especially in energy? Because they seem to have been undisclosed, and there's little information about private financing in China. Thank you.
Better, and if you could limit your questions, just 1 question per person. So that, no, Andrew, I meant that gentleman there. That, right, yeah, right there. Thanks.
Hi. Thank you. My name is Norman Van Doy from the U.S. International Trade Commission. My question is with regard to the effect of the urbanization of the Chinese population. Urbanization, people moving from the countryside to the city, regarding the use of energy. And secondly, the transformation of the Chinese industry from the low end of the market to the high end of the market in the future with respect to the use of the electricity and also the privatization of the Chinese energy market, the effect of the privatization of the Chinese market on the use of energy.
Is urbanization?
Yes, that was the first part. And the urbanization, I guess, changes soon. I'm sorry, the second part of the question. Oh, we need to wrap it up pretty soon. Okay. Given the VIP event next. Let me just stick the urbanization comment and then, I guess, I'm sorry, I think we ran out of, would you mind seeing him right after this event? And at least, since I promised the question, to take a question from him, but since we have the VIP expected here. Oh. Maybe the last, maybe like 2 minutes of the final closing comments, touching upon some of these elements.
Okay.
2 minutes, okay. Issue. So the CO2 emissions equity issue via exporting coal-fired plants to abroad, and then energy financing by private sector, and then urbanization.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I come back to the coal issues. That is very important. China is a bigger coal users, and the bigger source of the pollutions. That is the realities. And also, we have to say China should become a new source of the coal technology innovation. They should be natural, possible in China, because we have so big size of practice over there. So now we're really coming as a reality. I believe there's many best practices has there. Coal, we can be, today is dirty, short report, can be cleaner in tomorrow, especially many practices held down by Senhua. Senhua now sometimes they take themselves not only coal company, they always take themselves as a new energy company, simply because coal is only part of their energy business. And the coal can be utilized more efficiently. So sometimes say coal can be one type of the clean energy source. That is possible simply because of contribution of technology advances. That is the Chinese solution and contribution. Now turning to the second part of your questions. Yes, we have some big capacities, resources. We need to be outsourced, to go abroad, especially going to some neighboring countries where they have still bigger requirements to increase their energy consumptions, especially for countries like Southeast Asia, even India, South Asia, Pakistan. They have bigger requirements, have resources very relied on coal. In this sense, we cannot easily to ship our over capacity using the traditional system technology to them. That is not possible. That is not wise. We now find our way. If we make our energy cleaner successfully, that will be a bigger technology package, will be an important part of the shipment of our cooperation to other countries. So when we find our solution in China, that will be a solution for other countries as well. That's my answer to your question.
I think we need to wrap it up. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Please join me in thanking Xiaojie.
Yeah. Thank you.